what do you think is happening in Browns camp? What do you think is going to happen there? Before I let you go, Lewis.
You know, I think it really does all depend on how Kevin is able to, as it relates to Shedeur, work him in enough. Well, one, Shedeur has to earn the right for Kevin and the staff to have discussions about, hey, we got to get him more reps with the ones and twos. We got to get him more reps with the ones and twos when we're going team period, not just walk through or not just 7-on-7 team.
Louis Riddick reacted sharply on air after viewing practice footage from the Cleveland Browns. The clip showed quarterback Shedeur Sanders executing a string of precise throws while the Browns head coach watched with a broad smile. Riddick questioned whether the session was focused on evaluation or celebration, arguing that visible enthusiasm from the staff could cloud objective assessment of a rookie's progress. Earlier in the segment, Riddick's tone had been measured once the Sanders highlights appeared. He criticized the perception that a routine practice was being treated like a marquee event. He stressed that coaching reactions should remain subdued until performance translates into game situations. Riddick concluded by calling for accountability and asking the Browns to clarify how they plan to manage expectations for Shedeur Sanders as training camp continues.
Couldn't imagine me myself saying, hey, you know what, as someone who has been at the very bottom to try and ascend to like some level of success, I could never imagine going, you know what would be really cool? I'm gonna play a joke on someone like this and pretend that I'm a GM and I'm drafting you when actually I'm not, and then I'm gonna hang up and just giggle about it. Man, what the hell are we doing? Seriously, what are we doing when we think that kind of crap is funny?
I don't know. Trying to get likes on TikTok.
I don't have the right words for it.
Right, Lewis, I'm gonna say this.
I don't have the right words for it.
Few situations unsettle a former front office executive faster than watching coaches celebrate a rookie quarterback before pads come on in August. In Louis Riddick's view, the Browns staff did more than acknowledge promise. They acted as though they had already secured their franchise leader. Throughout the session, Shedeur Sanders delivered 40-yard throws off his back foot, ran crisp 2-minute drills, and displayed steadiness rare for a first-year player. According to reports, each successful rep drew audible admiration from the sideline, highlighting how quickly enthusiasm has escalated. When Riddick reviewed the same practice tape and heard the glowing comments, he challenged the reaction on live television. He argued that a few controlled drills should not override the methodical scouting and development work that normally guides roster decisions. Riddick's criticism focused less on Sanders' talent than on the evaluation process. He warned that comparing a prospect to established stars or joking about renaming the stadium creates pressure before the player has taken an NFL hit, faced a disguised coverage, or logged a preseason snap. Praising potential is acceptable, he said, but anointing a savior in July risks repeating the organization's history of premature quarterback expectations. Sanders brings confidence shaped by his father's legacy and his own disciplined preparation, yet Riddick insists that progress must be confirmed over time. He urged the Browns to temper public excitement, follow a structured development plan, and reserve celebratory reactions for on-field results that matter. Regular season production under live pressure, not highlight clips from a midsummer workout.
He has to earn that. Kevin has to figure out a way to do that. So then you can reasonably assess what you have in him compared to Dylan Gabriel, compared to Kenny, compared to Joe Flacco. If you don't, then the conversation surrounding him is going to continue to be what it's been, which is, but for some people, he was overhyped all along. He's not that great of an athlete, doesn't have a big enough arm. There's a reason why he was a 5th-round pick, blah, 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 which I don't believe. I believe if he is given enough reps, earns enough reps, and then is given enough reps in meaningful situations, he can throw the ball just as good as Joe, if not better, just as good as Kenny, if not better, just as good as Dylan Gabriel.
After more than 2 decades in personnel and broadcast analysis, Louis Riddick was dismayed to see a franchise bypass basic evaluation standards after only a series of eye-catching minicamp throws. Reviewing practice footage from Cleveland, he observed Shedeur Sanders drilling 40-yard passes against uncovered receivers and running 2-minute sequences with poise. In Riddick's view, those reps, conducted without pads, contact, or a disguised rush, show show arm talent but reveal little about how a rookie handles game pressure. Riddick said the Browns' reaction drifted from objective assessment to outright admiration. Multiple reports indicated coaches were sketching new concepts for Sanders during dinner and referring to dedicated Shedeur packages well before a padded practice. Even the veterans in the quarterback room showed no visible alarm, a sign that staff excitement had already reset the internal depth chart conversation. The analyst emphasized that his concern is not Sanders' skill set. He acknowledged the quarterback's arm strength, footwork, and composure, but rather how quickly the club appears willing to declare him its long-term answer. Riddick cited several past prospects who received similar midsummer acclaim only to stall once real competition began. Given Cleveland's long history of quarterback turnover, he argued the organization should focus on incremental milestones, processing post-snap reads, surviving live pass rushes, and rebounding from mistakes on Sunday afternoons. Riddick urged the Browns to temper expectations and follow a structured development plan so Shedeur Sanders can progress without undue pressure. One coach reportedly admitted he replayed Tuesday's scrimmage film so often that he lost sleep, an anecdote Riddick offered as proof that enthusiasm is already outpacing reality.
All asking now is what is going on with Shedeur Sanders, and so the floor is yours. Maybe you can make sense of this free fall with what was at one point the top-rated quarterback in this draft class.
Yeah, see, I think at this point in time, this really isn't a football discussion any longer. This is a personal discussion. This is about it's a fit discussion. It's whether or not teams are just comfortable with everything that comes along with Shedeur in terms of who he is as a person, all the people that are surrounding him in terms of his inner circle, and whether or not teams deem that to be something that they're comfortable with. Right or wrong, that's the only conclusion you can really come to at this point.
Louis Riddick voiced an escalating concern during the segment. Having witnessed numerous quarterback setbacks in his career, he worries another may be forming. Not because Shedeur Sanders lacks talent, but because the praise around him is growing without restraint. Sanders has simply attended practice, delivered accurate passes, led the huddle, and shown the composure expected of an NFL player. Riddick fears the Browns' reaction, treating routine drills as proof of long-term success, risks setting premature expectations. He cautioned that the organization seems ready to celebrate a franchise savior before Sanders has taken a competitive snap. They have never loathed college football itself. They have resisted the people determined to reshape it. When Deion Sanders, black, direct, unapologetic, walks into a room of power brokers and speaks with authority instead of deference, critics recoil. During his playing days, they complained about celebrations and gold chains. Now that he is a head coach, mentor, and father, they label him something more polite, but just as dismissive, a problem. At Big 12 Media Days, Sanders addressed the accelerating chaos of the name, image, likeness market. He said college football needs a salary cap, not to hobble players, but to impose order on a system that showers unproven freshmen with seven-figure promises while the rest of a roster hunts for scraps. He called the situation unsustainable. Within hours, ESPN commentator Paul Feinbaum branded him a hypocrite, arguing that Sanders profited from NIL at Jackson State and now wants rules only because his most marketable athletes have moved on. The accusation spread quickly because it fit a comfortable storyline. Outspoken black coach gains from change, then protests when the advantage disappears. That framing ignores context. Sanders never criticized players earning money. At Jackson State, he urged corporate sponsors to partner with athletes who had been invisible to major brands for decades. What he wants now is stability, standardized guidelines, basic financial literacy, and roster balance that prevents locker rooms from fracturing over uneven payouts. When other coaches, Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, Lane Kiffin, voiced similar concerns, they were praised for foresight. When Sanders spoke, the tone shifted to suspicion. The difference is not the message, it is the messenger. Feinbaum's response followed a familiar script. When black leaders question the structure of the sport, their motives are interrogated, their credibility attacked, and their competence doubted. He did not level the same charge at Jimbo Fisher when Fisher complained that NIL disturbed recruiting. He stayed silent when Kiffin lamented the transfer portal. But Sanders, who raised enrollment and television ratings at Jackson State, brought unprecedented attention to Colorado in one season and consistently mentors players beyond football, was called opportunistic. Feinbaum dismissed the cultural impact Sanders created. The exposure for historically black colleges, the draft picks developed, the infrastructure improved, reducing his work to a marketing stunt dependent on star sons Shedeur and Shiloh or two-way standout Travis Hunter. Sanders did not retaliate. He returned to practice, media obligations, and recruiting. His confidence is rooted in faith and in the responsibility he feels toward young athletes whose lives will extend decades beyond their highlight clips. When he asked for NIL boundaries, he is thinking about freshmen handed large sums without guidance, families unprepared for sudden wealth, and programs that abandon kids once production stalls. He has watched that cycle from the inside. He wants protections, not restrictions. Critics predicted Colorado would fade once Shedeur and Hunter leave. Instead, Sanders signed blue-chip quarterback G.J. Lewis and a wave of transfers eager to join a program that values personal growth as much as on-field wins. Recruits see a coach who challenges the status quo, who places black culture at the program's center without apology, and who will remain visible when social media buzz cools. They recognize that Sanders does not chase attention. Attention follows his results. Media outlets reduced the upcoming Buffaloes season to a win total prop. 6 victories, give or take. Sanders is playing a longer game. He wants to show young athletes, especially black athletes, that they can lead authentically, speak with conviction, and refuse to shrink for access. Success measured only by the scoreboard misses the point. If Sanders builds men who graduate with financial literacy, self-confidence, and community awareness, he will consider the mission successful, even if Colorado finishes with 5 wins instead of 10. None of that registers with commentators invested in an older hierarchy. For them, leadership should remain predictable, reserved posture, muted tone, minimal cultural expression. Sanders contradicts that image. The possibility that his methods could spread to other coaches, to other programs, threatens a model that has kept decision-making and revenue streams concentrated for generations. So the debate is not about hypocrisy or payroll ceilings. It is about control of the narrative and who is deemed qualified to write it. Sanders refuses to surrender that authority. He knows order is necessary. He also knows whose voices have been ignored whenever real reform is discussed. By speaking plainly, he forces television panels, athletic directors, and conference commissioners to confront issues they would rather defer: financial education, equitable resource distribution, and consistent national standards. Whether Colorado exceeds betting lines this fall will not change the trajectory Sanders has already set. He made Boulder relevant, energized recruiting beyond traditional power corridors, and broadened college football's cultural reach. That influence will persist long after social media debates cool. If his call for NIL structure eventually becomes policy, as the NCAA and Congress now contemplate, Feinbaum's soundbite will fade, while Sanders' imprint endures. In the end, accusations of hypocrisy say more about the accuser than the coach. Sanders has remained consistent: empower athletes, hold adults accountable, and inject stability before unchecked money corrodes the locker room. The people who stand to lose clout in that environment prefer the chaos they can manipulate. Sanders prefers a system that nurtures the players who make the sport worth watching. His advocacy is rooted in experience, not self-interest, and his critics will have to decide whether to engage with that reality or keep shouting from the sidelines. Chris Carter's televised assessment of Shedeur Sanders triggered immediate pushback from Cleveland fans, local media, and even several Browns veterans. Carter dismissed Sanders, a 5th-round pick, as unprepared to start, and framed the growing interest around him as purely a byproduct of surname recognition. Since that segment aired, practice reports have told a very different story. Observers inside the Browns facility describe a rookie quarterback who is closing the gap on Kenny Pickett and Dillon Gabriel with surprising speed. Sanders first turned heads in rookie minicamp by directing the huddle with a calm that belied his inexperience. Position coaches reported that he rarely repeated mental errors during installation periods, a trait they rank highly when grading young quarterbacks. In organized team activities, he showed consistent timing on intermediate routes, kept turnover numbers low in 7-on-7 periods, and demonstrated early command of Kevin Stefanski's protection calls. That steady execution earned him a handful of first-team snaps, reps that would ordinarily have belonged to Pickett by default. By mandatory minicamp, the rotation had shifted again. Practice notes from beat reporters detail the rise in Sanders' workload each day. Red zone series against the starting defense, 2-minute drills, and full field scrimmage possessions in which he checked out of called plays when fronts dictated it. Mary Kay Cabot, initially skeptical Sanders would challenge for game day snaps in 2025, wrote after consecutive sessions in mid-June that his footwork, release speed, and pocket management had, quote, meaningfully tightened since rookie camp. Her tone marked a clear departure from early spring projections that labeled Sanders a long-term developmental project. The broader quarterback context in Cleveland magnifies that progress. Deshaun Watson's availability and form remain uncertain after 2 injury-interrupted seasons, while Pickett's transition from Pittsburgh has been uneven. Dillon Gabriel's arm strength is evident, but coaches continue to stress hesitation in his full-field reads. Against that backdrop, Sanders' quick decision-making and mechanical efficiency have begun to look less like a pleasant surprise and more like the roster's most reliable short-term plan. Inside the locker room, acceptance has followed performance. Wide receivers cite Sanders' ball placement on outbreaking routes, noting that the ball routinely arrives on the upfield shoulder, a small but essential detail that allows for yards after the catch. Offensive linemen appreciate his pocket awareness. Joel Bitonio remarked privately that Sanders slides up instead of bailing when edge pressure flashes. Defensive backs say his eye discipline forces them to hold coverage longer than they expected against a rookie. Such cross-positional respect develops only when day-to-day tape shows tangible improvement. The reaction to Carter's critique highlights a recurring double standard applied to young black quarterbacks. Traits celebrated as swagger or confidence in other players were labeled arrogance when associated with Sanders, yet the quarterback himself has not responded publicly. There have been no subtle social media jabs, no mention of critics and interviews, only repeated references to competing for every rep and learning from veterans. That measured approach, combined with hard evidence from practice, has softened earlier doubts among coaches who prioritize demeanor as much as arm talent. Within the coaching staff, the discussion now centers on readiness thresholds. Stefanski's scheme relies heavily on quick rhythm throws, defined reads, and disciplined pocket movement. Those requirements align with Sanders' strengths: a compact release, willingness to target the middle of the field, and instinctive timing on RPO concepts carried over from his college tape. Staffers reviewing cut-ups from joint practices note that his internal clock already approximates NFL speed, a metric they did not expect to see until mid-season at best. If that trajectory continues through preseason games, the Browns face a consequential decision. Starting a 5th-round rookie 6 weeks after training camp opens would unsettle salary cap assumptions, depth chart politics, and external perceptions of organizational stability. Yet the internal mandate remains clear: the most prepared quarterback will play. That standard places Sanders in genuine contention because every practice metric used to grade readiness, turnover ratio, red zone efficiency, third down conversion rate has trended in his favor since early June. The organizational stakes are considerable. Cleveland has cycled through starting quarterbacks at a startling pace over the past decade, shifting from first-round investments like Baker Mayfield to high-cost gambles such as Watson, each move packaged as the long-awaited solution. A rookie chosen outside the first 100 picks ascending to the top of the depth chart would challenge long-held league assumptions about draft pedigree and opportunity. It would also validate the evaluation philosophy that prioritized Sanders' intangibles: processing speed, leadership presence, over conventional arm strength thresholds that pushed him down the draft board. Carter's televised remarks now sit awkwardly alongside daily updates from Berea. His critique relied on pre-draft labels and the presumption that a late-round passer with a famous father would need a redshirt year. Practice film contradicts that stance. Sanders checks protections at the line, manipulates safeties with shoulder fakes, and has reduced turnover-worthy throws and full-speed sessions to single digits. Statistics normally cited for veteran backups, not rookies. The longer that evidence accumulates, the more Carter's comments appear rooted in legacy bias rather than objective performance review. None of this guarantees Sanders will open the season under center. Preseason defenses test quarterbacks in ways practice cannot. Defensive coordinators will disguise pressure and boundary rotation to force late decisions. Sanders must show he can adjust protections and exploit mismatches without the benefit of a controlled environment. Yet within the Browns facility, the conversation has shifted from if he will be ready to when. Quiet confidence from Amari Cooper and other veterans suggests they believe Sanders can steady an offense searching for consistency more than highlight reel heroics. Sanders' rise also affects long-term roster calculus. If he earns the job and performs competently, Cleveland gains starter-level production on a cost-controlled rookie contract, freeing cap space allocated to other positions. That scenario could reshape roster-building strategy in a division featuring Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, quarterbacks whose contracts consume significant percentages of team payroll. A capable, low-cost starter would allow the Browns to reinforce their offensive line and secondary while retaining core veterans, a competitive advantage few teams enjoy. For now, the focal point remains daily improvement. Sanders continues to arrive before sunrise, reviewing the previous day's install with the quarterback coach, then staying after practice to throw on-air routes with receivers low on the depth chart. Coaches track those habits closely because consistent routine underpins performance when adversity strikes in live games. Each incremental gain strengthens the argument that readiness depends on preparation and aptitude, not draft slot. Carter's segment reminded the league how quickly assessments can become outdated when they lean on perception over evidence. Sanders' steady climb up the depth chart underscores the counterpoint. In the NFL, tape is the final arbiter. Should Sanders translate practice efficiency to preseason success? The Browns may discover that the solution to their long-standing quarterback riddle arrived quietly in the 5th round, carrying little more than confidence and a willingness to work. Shedeur Sanders did not treat day 4 of Browns training camp as anything other than work. He completed 8 of 11 passes with 3 touchdowns, operating with control and accuracy throughout the red zone periods. The throws were varied, a well-placed ball to rookie Luke Floria that led him across the goal line in stride, a firm throw to Cade McDonald over middle after a quick read, and a tight window completion to Deontay Johnson at the back of the end zone with 2 defenders closing. The sequence showed timing, poise, and placement under pressure. While national attention centered on Joe Flacco's underneath completions and Kenny Pickett's option and rollout periods, Sanders produced scoring plays on schedule. The performance was not the product of broken coverages or end-of-period reps. It came within structured work with defenders in position and the offense executing standard progressions. The accuracy rate, 8 completions on 11 attempts, reflected consistent mechanics and decisions. The operation was steady from huddle to snap to finish. Despite that session, the distribution of first-team snaps did not change. Camp logs indicated that Pickett and Dillon Gabriel continued rotating with the starters, while Sanders remained primarily with the second unit. With the first preseason game approaching, that choice drew more attention from observers who expected productive days to be followed by expanded opportunities. The question surfaced again: what additional evidence is required to evaluate Sanders with the top group? The 3 touchdowns illustrated different aspects of his profile. On the throw to Floria, Sanders used a measured trajectory to lead the receiver away from contact and into the end zone. On the ball to Johnson, he identified leverage, held the safety with his shoulders, and delivered to a precise spot at the back line. On the throw to McDonald, he eliminated the first read, reset, and drove the ball into the window before the hook defender could squeeze it. Each score reflected a particular tool: anticipation, manipulation, and velocity within standard timing. Comparisons to the other quarterbacks were straightforward. Pickett produced 2 touchdowns but placed 1 late ball that exposed a receiver to contact near the goal line. Gabriel accounted for 1 score, with additional gains coming on checkdowns and designed movement. Flacco advanced the ball in short increments without finishing drives during the same period. Sanders converted opportunities into points repeatedly and without turnovers. The rotation, however, remained unchanged. Head coach Kevin Stefanski and the staff continued to allocate first-team work to the same group, describing the process as an open evaluation. In practice, that has meant extended starter reps for Pickett and Gabriel, veteran scripts for Flacco, and second unit periods for Sanders. The disconnect between output and opportunity was notable, particularly given the stated goal of reaching an early decision at quarterback. When asked about the timeline recently, Stefanski said the preference was to decide sooner rather than later, an acknowledgement that the window for assessment is limited as preseason approaches. Speculation about motives is common in such situations. The discussion has included references to front office perspectives and ownership influence. Owner Jimmy Haslam is widely viewed as supportive of drafting Sanders. General manager Andrew Berry is known for prioritizing fit, traits, and process within the roster building model. Stefanski reports to Berry, and the practice plan reflects coaching evaluation within organizational parameters. None of that guarantees any outcome. It does explain why rotations can remain conservative even after strong individual periods. Regardless of internal views, the most useful next step for the evaluation would be a defined set of first-team snaps for Sanders to put comparable tape next to his peers. There was also outside attention on several practice segments from earlier in camp that showed Sanders throwing during lulls to non-receiver personnel, ball attendants, staffers, and assistants, while other quarterbacks were in script with full units. Those clips circulated widely and were interpreted by some as dismissive. Sanders addressed questions about it by narrowing the focus to preparation, explaining that his responsibility is to be ready for the work assigned and that he has adjusted at every level of competition, from HBCU ball to the Power 5 and now the NFL. The response matched his general approach: acknowledge the situation, maintain routine, and continue to execute when the next period begins. The broader draft day play and narrative context remains part of the conversation. Sanders' college resume included efficient production and high completion rates across 2 programs, culminating in national recognition such as the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award. His selection in the 5th round was driven by varying evaluations of projection, scheme fit, and development timelines. The result is the current environment. He must present his case within limited windows, then wait for access to the next rung of competition. That does not make the process unfair, it makes it exacting. The best answer, for him and for the staff, is additional, comparable reps and clear tape. Fan reaction after day 4 was direct. Social accounts and comment threads filled with assessments that centered on performance rather than reputation. Sanders produced 3 touchdowns, avoided negative plays, and showed command in the red zone. Supporters pointed to that tape and asked for opportunities with the starters to verify whether the same rhythm carries over with the top receivers and linemen. The message was not about headlines, it was about the logic of evaluation in a compressed calendar. From an operational standpoint, Sanders' day reflected consistent fundamentals. His base was disciplined, his eyes matched his feet, and his timing aligned with route depths. On the Johnson score, he used a subtle shoulder turn to hold the safety before resetting and throwing to the back line. On the McDonald throw, the ball was out on the second hitch, arriving before the defenders could converge. On the Floria play, the arc and placement minimized the hit risk and maximized the run-through. Those are portable traits. They translate across units if the timing with receivers is established through reps. The staff's balancing act is real. They must prepare the presumed week 1 starter with sufficient continuity while also giving developmental players enough exposure to judge ceiling and floor. That tension is present in every camp. The cleanest path through it is to carve out defined first-team sequences for each competitor and evaluate the tape against comparable defenses and situations. High red zone, low red zone, 3rd and medium, and 2-minute. Sanders' performance on day 4 strengthened the case for such an allocation. Context matters off the field as well. Earlier in the offseason, 2 speeding citations, 91 miles per hour in Brunswick and 101 miles per hour in Strongsville, prompted public comment from Barry, who emphasized standards and safety. Sanders accepted responsibility, stated that he learned from the incidents and moved on. In camp, he has kept the focus on football tasks, install retention, cadence management, protection IDs, and post-practice review. He has also continued to build rapport across position groups, including veteran receivers and defensive backs, so that timing and expectations are clear when reps arrive. None of this diminishes the experience of the veterans in the room. Flacco has decades of film, Pickett has multiple seasons of NFL starts, and Gabriel brings mobility and a defined collegiate profile. It does, however, underscore the purpose of camp, to align decisions with current performance. Sanders produced the most efficient scoring period of the day. The next logical step is to see that operation with the starting unit, document the results, and compare them to the other candidates under the same conditions. The preseason opener will compress timelines further. Install packages expand, and coaches begin to narrow personnel groupings. If the objective is to identify the quarterback who can operate the offense most cleanly on Sundays, then structured exposure now will give the staff better information later. A small but deliberate set of first-team snaps for Sanders, scripted early downs, a 3rd down sequence, and a red zone series would provide data without disrupting broader preparation. Until that occurs, Sanders can only continue to control process and execution. Day 4 showed what that looks like when opportunities align. Efficient reads, disciplined mechanics, and finishes in the end zone. He did not seek attention for the sequence. He put it on tape. If the evaluation remains consistent with the stated competition, comparable snaps should follow. If they do, the staff will have a clear side-by-side measure. If they do not, the question from observers will remain the same. What more needs to be seen to justify the look? For now, the record from day 4 is clear. 8 completions on 11 attempts, 3 touchdowns, no turnovers, red zone precision, consistent control at the line and in the pocket. Those are tangible outputs. They merit a defined opportunity with the starters as the team moves toward preseason and the decision that follows. Whether or not that opportunity arrives immediately, Sanders has shown the preparation and execution necessary to be evaluated on equal footing. The next step is a matter of allocation, not speculation. The 2025 NFL Draft was expected to be Shedeur Sanders' moment. Many projected him as a top 10 talent and a headline quarterback in one of the most discussed college football storylines in years. Instead of walking across the stage on the first night, he waited through 3 days without a call. There was no celebration, only silence. When the phone finally rang at pick no. 144 in the 5th round, it was the Cleveland Browns. With that selection, the financial outlook changed dramatically. The Sanders family believes this was not a typical draft slide, but the result of coordinated action. They are pursuing a $100 million lawsuit alleging collusion across parts of the league. In the months before the draft, Sanders was consistently discussed among the top quarterbacks in the class. Television and digital analysts praised his poise, accuracy, leadership, and command. Scouts highlighted a 74.1% completion rate, record-setting stretches at Colorado, and his rise from an HBCU star to a national figure. Consensus expectations placed him in the first round or early second. Draft night unfolded differently. As picks accumulated, there was little indication that his name would be called. The atmosphere at his private gathering shifted from anticipation to doubt. When the Browns selected him late on day 3, projections for his first contract dropped from an estimated range in the mid-$30 million to approximately $4.6 million, with corresponding reductions in likely endorsements and long-term positioning. According to Deion Sanders and others close to the family, this was not about performance, injury, or conduct. They argue it was coordinated. Attorneys were contacted immediately. The allegation is straightforward. Sanders' value was suppressed intentionally. The family's position is that this was a calculated decision within parts of the league, not an isolated set of evaluations. The legal claims focus on communications that, if authenticated, could be significant. Internal emails, text messages, and owner-to-owner conversations. The family's representatives contend that these materials show a deliberate effort to avoid drafting Sanders in early rounds based on perceived image concerns rather than football merit. One message reportedly under review framed the decision in branding terms. Drafting Shedeur would mean inheriting the Prime brand. The complaint asserts that this view led some teams to discourage others from selecting him unless necessary, not for film-based reasons, but to avoid perceived attention and external pressure tied to his family's profile. A related thread involves speculation about team fit and willingness to play for certain franchises. Past public comments by Deion Sanders were interpreted by some as signals of an Eli Manning scenario. The family's view is that these were strategic statements, not ultimatums. They argue that rather than engage in discussion, teams chose a passive approach, no direct rebuttal, reduced contact, and a collective reluctance to invest a premium pick. If phone records and written communications corroborate coordination, these items could become central exhibits. Media tone shifted as the draft neared. Coverage that had emphasized production and leadership began highlighting intangibles, interviews, and perceived coachability. Anonymous sourcing appeared in multiple outlets, with claims that Sanders skipped combine drills out of arrogance, bristled at film critique, or told one club, "Maybe I'm not the guy for you," after a tense session. A widely cited line, "Nobody wants a celebrity backup quarterback," was voiced by Colin Cowherd and circulated as shorthand for risk. The Sanders legal position is that these narratives did not arise organically, but reflected a coordinated leak pattern that undermined his market value. The family's contention is that this was primarily about control and compliance rather than football ability. They point out that Sanders did not fail a drug test, was not suspended, and did not produce poor athletic testing. His college resume included elite stretches and significant program elevation at 2 stops. The legal claim asserts that the league's power structure resisted a high-profile player aligned with a high-profile parent coach and an independent media presence. The allegation is that teams sought to avoid the perceived complexity that would come with selecting him early. The financial impact is a core component of the damages claim. Had Sanders been selected late first or early second round, projected 4-year compensation would likely have fallen between $30 to $35 million, with immediate access to higher tier endorsement opportunities and the brand leverage that accompanies a franchise quarterback designation. As a 5th round pick, the initial contract value is a fraction of that total, and associated off-field opportunities are typically narrower. The suit reportedly seeks not only lost salary, but also the broader economic value linked to draft position, sponsorships, licensing, and the visibility that accelerates an early career trajectory. The filing's scope, as described by sources close to the family, extends beyond the league office. It may involve media outlets, scouting firms, and specific executives if discovery shows coordination or materially false statements that affected value. The argument is that the draft slide harmed not only Shedeur, but also the broader Sanders brand, affecting perceptions of Deion Sanders as a recruiter, coach, and public figure. The family's view is that narrative construction around brand risk and celebrity backup produced a measurable economic and reputational loss. If a court authorizes discovery, the process would likely compel emails, internal draft notes, and message archives from teams and third-party intermediaries. Subpoenas could be served on media organizations for sourcing records related to anonymous quotes. That level of transparency would be unusual and could reveal how information flows during pre-draft periods. The legal theory moves beyond a single player's evaluation to the draft's integrity, whether owners or executives acted in concert to reduce a prospect's value for reasons unrelated to football performance. The league has not publicly addressed these specific allegations. Background comments from executives characterize the claims as overreach. The family's camp maintains they have documentation sufficient to proceed. The comparison points referenced by observers include Deflategate, Spygate, and the Colin Kaepernick grievance, not because the facts are the same, but because of the potential scope, policies, practices, and the balance of power between the league and individuals challenging its processes. Another dimension of the dispute involves how the NFL perceives Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, and the autonomy he promotes. He built a large media footprint around his programs at Jackson State and Colorado, elevated his players' profiles, and spoke openly about fit and leverage. The family contends that this visibility, combined with statements about preferred destinations, triggered resistance. The complaint frames the response as a preference for compliance and predictability over independent branding and public negotiation. The suit also addresses the pre-draft decisions that critics point to: skipping the Senior Bowl, declining full workouts at the NFL Scouting Combine, and candid interviews about team fits. The family characterizes these as strategic choices commonly made by top prospects, not evidence of entitlement. Their view is that similar decisions by other players did not produce the same narrative because those players fit more comfortably within league expectations. The risk calculus is clear. Bringing a suit of this magnitude invites professional consequences. The family acknowledges that some within the league may react negatively. Their position is that the principle at stake, transparent and fair valuation, warrants the risk. The message they intend to send is that manufactured narratives and coordinated devaluation should face scrutiny, particularly when they affect earnings, opportunity, and reputation. If the case advances, several outcomes are possible. The court could find insufficient evidence of coordination, limiting the scope to individual judgments protected as opinion. It could also find enough to proceed to broader discovery, which would have implications beyond one player, including potential changes to how teams document evaluations and how media handle anonymous sourcing close to the draft. Agents might push for reforms, including clearer guardrails around leaks and standardized prospect communication records. For now, Sanders is working within the Browns structure. He has avoided public escalation beyond confirming focus on preparation and development. The lawsuit is a separate track managed by counsel. This dual approach, professional routine on the field and legal action off it, reflects the family's strategy. They intend to contest the process they believe harmed him while meeting club expectations day to day. The core allegations remain consistent across their statements. A talented quarterback saw his draft value suppressed by coordinated behavior tied to branding concerns and public positioning rather than football merit. Media narratives amplified that shift, and the result was a substantial, quantifiable loss. The remedy sought includes compensation and a measure of accountability that could deter similar conduct. Whether the claims are ultimately proven will depend on documentation and testimony. If emails, texts, and call logs substantiate coordination, the impact could be significant, prompting policy review around pre-draft communications and media engagement. If not, the case may narrow to disputes over opinion, perception, and the gray areas of scouting. Either way, the filing signals a willingness to confront entrenched practices and to test in court how far the process extends beyond film and interviews. This situation has moved from speculation to litigation. It addresses control, image, and power in a system that influences careers and compensation. It also underscores how public narratives can shape market outcomes. Sanders' path now has 2 tracks: earning opportunities on the field in Cleveland and seeking redress off the field for what the family views as an avoidable and orchestrated loss. The questions at stake are larger than one draft slot. They touch on how the league values independence, how information is weaponized, and what recourse exists when a player believes the evaluation moved from football to optics. The answers will emerge through practice reps and, potentially, through discovery and a courtroom record.